Donald Trump is one of the most controversial and scandalous figures in modern world politics. To his supporters, he was a leader who wanted to restore America's strength and independence. But to millions of others, Trump became a symbol of chaos, economic instability, global conflict, and deep division inside the United States. When Trump first came to power, he promised to make America great again. He claimed he would bring back jobs, restore American industry, strengthen the economy, and put the interests of the United States above everything else. His speeches were loud, aggressive, and emotional. Millions of Americans believed that he could save the country. But instead of unity, America became even more divided. Political hatred inside the United States reached an unprecedented level. People stopped seeing each other simply as Democrats or Republicans. Families argued over politics, friendships were destroyed, and social media turned into a battlefield of endless conflict and propaganda. Major American cities were filled with protests, riots, and violence. The United States, once presented as a symbol of stability and democracy, slowly began looking like a country trapped in constant crisis and internal chaos. One of Trump's biggest moves was launching an economic war against China. He openly accused Beijing of destroying American manufacturing, stealing technology, and manipulating trade. In response, Trump imposed massive tariffs on Chinese goods. China retaliated immediately. What followed became one of the largest trade wars in modern history. Trump claimed this would save American workers and bring factories back to the United States. But the consequences were far more complicated. American businesses that relied on Chinese manufacturing and components faced rising costs. Prices increased on electronics, vehicles, construction materials, and everyday consumer goods. Farmers lost major export markets in China, and uncertainty spread across the global economy. Financial markets reacted nervously to every new announcement from Washington. Investors feared recession, while economists warned that Trump's aggressive economic policies could trigger worldwide instability. But China was not the only target. Trump also attacked America's traditional allies in Europe. He repeatedly criticized NATO countries, accusing them of depending on the United States for protection while refusing to pay enough for their own defense. Relations between Washington and Europe became increasingly tense. European leaders openly began discussing a growing crisis of trust toward the United States. At the same time, Trump constantly made contradictory statements regarding Russia. On one hand, he approved sanctions and tough policies. On the other, he repeatedly claimed he wanted better relations with Moscow. This inconsistency created confusion both inside America and among its allies. The Middle East also became a center of escalating tension during Trump's presidency. His administration strongly supported Israel and made decisions that caused outrage across the Arab world. One of the most controversial actions was officially recognizing Jerusalem as the capital of Israel and moving the U.S. embassy there. At the same time, tensions with Iran exploded. Trump withdrew the United States from the international nuclear agreement with Iran. Despite support, the situation became even more dangerous after the assassination of Iranian General Qasem Soleimani. Around the world, fears of a large-scale Middle Eastern war rapidly increased. Millions worried that one mistake could trigger catastrophic consequences. Even Venezuela became part of the geopolitical confrontation. Trump's administration openly supported efforts to remove Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro from power. The United States recognized opposition leadership and increased political and economic pressure against Caracas. Critics accused Washington of once again interfering in the internal affairs of another sovereign nation. According to Trump's critics, his foreign policy created instability not only in Latin America, but across the entire world. Global energy markets also became increasingly unstable. Every statement about Iran, sanctions, China, or military action affected oil prices almost instantly. Fuel prices rose in many countries, and fears surrounding strategic trade routes, such as the Suez Canal, increased dramatically. Experts warned that any escalation in the Middle East could severely disrupt global trade and trigger another economic crisis. And the consequences were not limited to the United States. Europe struggled with economic pressure and rising energy costs. China faced trade losses and slower growth. Russia experienced additional sanctions and geopolitical confrontation. Kazakhstan, Uzbekistan, and other Central Asian nations felt the effects through inflation, currency instability, and reduced investor confidence. Even countries like Brazil suffered from the consequences of global economic uncertainty and trade conflicts. Around the world, ordinary people began paying the price for growing tensions between major powers. Meanwhile, inside America, the situation continued deteriorating. During Trump's presidency, the country experienced massive protests, riots, and social unrest. Following the death of George Floyd, millions of people flooded the streets demanding justice and protesting against police brutality and racism. Entire cities were overwhelmed by demonstrations and violent clashes. The nation appeared exhausted and deeply divided. Trust in politicians, media institutions, and even the democratic system itself began collapsing. Then came the COVID-19 pandemic, one of the most devastating crises in modern American history. This period brought some of the harshest criticism of Trump's leadership. Critics accused him of reacting too slowly, downplaying the danger of the virus, contradicting scientists, and creating confusion during a national emergency. Millions of Americans lost their jobs. Thousands of businesses shut down permanently. Hospitals faced enormous pressure, while the government printed trillions of dollars in an attempt to prevent total economic collapse. Although this temporarily stabilized the economy, the long-term consequences became severe. Inflation surged. Prices for food, housing, gasoline, and loans increased rapidly. Ordinary Americans increasingly felt that life was becoming unaffordable. At the same time, the U.S. national debt climbed to record levels. Economists warned that America was living on borrowed money and slowly losing financial stability. Newspapers and analysts continued publishing alarming headlines. Crisis? Chaos? The end of Trump's presidency became one of the most dramatic moments in modern American history. After losing the 2020 election, Trump refused to fully accept the results and claimed widespread fraud. His supporters organized massive protests, culminating in the storming of the U.S. Capitol. Images from Washington shocked the world. The nation that had long presented itself as the global symbol of democracy suddenly appeared trapped in a deep internal crisis. To some people, Donald Trump remains a leader who fought against globalization and defended American interests. But to others, he became the face of political chaos, aggressive nationalism, economic instability, and global tension. Critics argue that under Trump, the world became more dangerous and unpredictable. Trade wars, rising national debt, geopolitical conflicts, inflation, energy crises, growing fuel prices, unstable markets, and international fear all became part of the Trump era. And as Trump continues making headlines and returning to the center of global politics, the arguments surrounding him only grow stronger. Some still call him America's savior. Others believe he became the man who pushed not only the United States, but much of the world, into an era of instability, conflict, and uncertainty. But one thing is undeniable: Donald Trump permanently changed America and changed the world with it. And the consequences of that era will continue to be debated by politicians, journalists, economists, and ordinary people across the globe for many years to come.